Welcome to the Heartland Running Podcast. Join Crystal, Andy, and Stephen as they explore all things running related in the Heartland and beyond.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Heartland Running Podcast. I'm Crystal.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Stephen.
And we are your jolly good hosts for the day.
I like that. Clean, simple, nice.
Very appropriate. But I have a question for you guys. So I know, Stephen, you've traveled a lot. Andy, you know people from all over. When you meet people or you're traveling and you're in a new place and there's an accent, do you catch yourself adopting that accent? Or you are just who you are?
For me, I kind of relish it a little bit whenever I travel because I do have a very, people have told me I've got a very strong Southwest Missouri Ozark accent. And so, I try to more just enjoy it and embellish it and just own it.
Coming from Ohio, Florida, and the Ozarks, I probably have a very unique accent, so I just kind of absorb a little of everything. So maybe I'll have something to add after this show.
Hey, maybe. See, I'm one of those people, especially because most people don't realize I'm from Canada because I've lost all of my accent. And I'm one of those people I feel like whenever I start talking to somebody, I start slipping into an accent. So if I start doing that tonight, you guys have to call me on it and catch me before I make a complete fool of myself. Deal?
Can do.
Sure, we'll do that.
All right, because I'm very, very excited for our guest tonight. We have Tina Muir with us. 2016 was a very, very big year for Tina. In March, she fulfilled a lifelong dream of representing Great Britain in the Half Marathon World Championship. A few weeks later, in April, she ran the London Marathon in 2 hours, 37 minutes, which was a PR at the time. But she wasn't satisfied with that, so she finished out 2016 at the California International Marathon in December, where she finished 5th overall and lowered that personal best down to 2:36. Then come this year in February, she kind of shocked everybody by announcing her decision to step down from competitive running. But 2017 and into 2018 are shaping up to be very, very special years for her. And so I want to welcome Tina to the show. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited and nice little intro there. I appreciate that.
Well, we're very excited to have you. And so I don't want to go too far into any stories and stuff. I want you to be able to tell your story of the reason for deciding to step down and what's coming this year and next year.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm excited to tell it. And, it always seems to kind of surprise people with how it worked. But hopefully it's something interesting and worth listening to.
Well, I just have one quick question. You're supposed to lower your marathon time? I've been doing it wrong. I've been going the other way. Have to work on that.
I think if I tried to run one now, I would probably run about 2 hours slower than I did the last one. So it has that for slower.
And you'd still be beating a bunch of us. So it's all good. Yeah. So tell us a bit about why, after just having such a stellar year, that you made that announcement in February.
It's kind of strange now because it feels like such a long time ago, but it actually, when I look at it, it wasn't that long. It was, 6 months ago that, I kind of came to this conclusion. But I was just, I'd had this huge year in 2016. And I think part of it was that whole thing of, you've reached your goal and it's kind of, where do I go now? Whenever anyone has a really big goal, like I want to, make $1 million. I want to set up my own business. I want to do this. I want to do that. Whenever you have that big goal and you accomplish it, you're kind of left with this. Well, what now? Like kind of you hear of that a lot with Olympians, how when they get to the Olympics or they win an Olympic gold medal, they're like, okay, what now? And so I was kind of going through a bit of that, but I still had some marathon kind of stuff I wanted to do. And I wasn't happy with my PRs as kind of like close the book PRs. But I just noticed I had this growing unease whenever it came to running. And obviously being a professional runner, I was spending, 15 to 20 hours a week on it. But it was getting to the point where not only was I not enjoying the after part of running, not only was I not enjoying the running part where I was actually doing it, but even afterwards, it wasn't giving me the same kind of satisfaction. And I just found myself being very, very negative, in a kind of defeated way, saying, I don't want to do this in my head rather than I can't do this. And once you get to that kind of mindset, there's no real going back. But I couldn't quite get myself to say it out loud until one day I spent a few weeks at home, or 4 weeks at home with my sister and her newborn baby. And so that kind of wore me down enough, staying overnight with her while her husband, who worked night shifts as a pediatric nurse, I spent nights with her, and so I didn't get any sleep, and it kind of wore me down enough to where I think I kind of eventually, combined with the 90 miles a week I was still trying to run, had that breaking point where I finally could say, like, you know what, I'm done with this. And then I finally was able to say it out loud, and once I said it out loud, I felt relief. And so when I felt relief, that was the sign, kind of like, oh, okay, I think we've made a decision here. So felt good.
And so you talked about home. Explain where home is, both here and away.
Yeah. So here right now, I am in Lexington, Kentucky, and home for me is St. Albans in England, in the UK. So I've been in the US about 12 years. So I guess I should start calling the US home, but it's still always going to be England for me, I'm afraid.
I totally understand. And so with that too, and deciding to step down, you had some health reasons that kind of went along with that. And you've been very open with your story. And it's kind of interesting to see how viral your story has gone. So it's been picked up, by a lot of running outlets and sports outlets. But then also, I saw that you had a feature in People that talked about and stuff too. So it's clearly something that's important and touching a nerve for a lot of women. So if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So there was, this going on underneath, and it had been kind of going on beneath the surface for about 2 or 3 years where, I'd been through the stage where I hadn't had a period in what ended up being 9 years, but it was more that, actually it's probably going to be 10 because I skipped, I skipped it now as well. So 9 years, but I kind of, for the first 5 or so years, I kind of pushed it out of my head, I'll deal with that later. I wasn't really in a stage where, I was mid-20s and I had my running and that was more important. So I just pushed it out. But the 2 years before this, 2014 and beyond, it just become in my mind more that something wasn't right. And if I wasn't having any cycles whatsoever, not only would I not be able to have a child when I wanted to have a child, I didn't know if I was doing any long-term damage. So could I even have a child? And also it was just, there's got to be some damage I am doing to my body by, it completely being like a barren wasteland, essentially, when it comes to, female hormones. So I started digging, and the more I kind of dug and looked around, I really wasn't getting any answers. And every test I did, everything I did kind of kept coming back saying, you're fine, you're great, everything looks good. And even like I went to a naturopath and she was like, everything looks great, you're very healthy. And, naturopaths are kind of known, I don't know what the word would be over here, if it's the same word as it is in England. But, they're kind of known for picking the tiniest of little things that someone might have wrong and saying, you have an intolerance to this or that. But she said it. So at that point, February, I was just at a point where I was like, okay, I have to do something drastic about this. And I knew that stopping running and gaining weight was probably the surefire way to get my period back.
That had to have been hard. I heard, and I think it was on your own podcast when you were talking about one of the first steps was really kind of discovering who you are. And I thought that was really interesting because I think even just us as recreational runners, when we're injured or because of, life events or something happens and we can't run for a couple days or heaven forbid a couple weeks, like our world comes crashing down and we don't know who we are. And it's hard for us. So I can't imagine. I mean, you've been running, competitively for a long time and that's who you are. And so to be able to just stop and walk away, I mean, that had to be incredibly difficult?
I mean, it wasn't. In a lot of ways, it was actually easier than, I'd had plenty of injuries over the years, had time off here, and I'd had those same meltdowns of, oh no, what am I going to do now? My race is out the window, and then I can't do this, and then I can't do that, and just your mind spirals out of control. But I almost think with this situation, because I held the decision, I said, I'm doing this, I'm stepping away, and I knew I knew I could keep going. And to be honest, I probably would have, my husband still thinks this day I would have run 2-3 minutes, maybe even 4 minutes faster in the marathon had we done one more in July, which is when I planned on it. But I knew if I kept forcing my head when it wasn't in it, I would get to the point where I just hated everything about running. And so I think having the power to be able to say, I'm choosing to walk away kind of eased it a little bit. Whereas when you're injured, it's kind of like, here you go, you're injured, go sit on the couch. Whereas this was like, I'm choosing to go on the couch. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how it made it easier for me.
That does. It makes sense. It's, you're in control. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just like Crystal said that, you were in control of that decision. That's something that you really wanted to do. What was some of the reactions of like people around you? Like friends, family, coaches, and then especially, what was your husband's reaction whenever you made that decision and said, this is what I'm going to do?
Well, I mean, the day I said it initially was the day I was flying back to the US, and I, attempted to do this hard workout. I ended up getting kicked off my high school track or my childhood track because they said it was private or whatever. But then that was what made the snapping point for me. And then I just went home and I fell into my parents' house, and my sister happened to be there standing in the hallway holding this baby. And I just fell to the ground and I cried and I said, I'm done. And all of well, I guess 4 of them, 3 of them and a baby were looking at me, and I knew they knew I was serious. But I said, I have to call Steve, who's my husband. And it was about 8 a.m. there, so like 3 a.m. in the US. And I was like, I have to call him. I don't care. This is too important. And so I called him and he answered and I said, I'm done. And he was like, okay, well, we'll talk about it when you get home. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I'm done. I'm done. And so I think at first he wasn't quite sure if I was just kind of in the moment and saying it. But then as soon as I got back here, he realized that, this was serious, and I meant it. And so he kind of said to me, all right, let's take a week, kind of think about it. And during that week, I tried to kind of bully him into giving me his thoughts on it. But he was absolutely adamant he was not going to tell me what he thought, and it had to be my decision. So he kind of helped me walk through both sides of it and both options, but he would not give me what he thought in any way. I could kind of tell that he would almost rather me keep running because he knew I was so close to a breakthrough. But he also said to me, it has to be your heart and it has to be your decision. And then once I said it to him that I was agreeing that, a week later that this was it, he was like, okay, all right, next step, what should we do? And so he was very supportive. Friends and family were a bit more interesting. Running friends were a little more like shocked. And they were very kind of more supportive and kind of happy about it than I thought they'd be. I thought people would maybe be like, what are you doing? Like, why are you throwing your talent away? But most people were very supportive. But friends I'd known who weren't runners, high school friends and people like that, they kind of almost celebrated, like they'd been waiting for me to come to this conclusion, almost as if running was like a fad and they were just waiting for me to kind of come out of the other side of it. So that was a bit strange for me, seeing kind of almost being like, how when someone breaks up with a boyfriend who people don't like and you say, oh, we've broken up, and they're like, oh, good, I never liked him anyway. It kind of almost felt a bit like that, but I knew they were proud of me, but I think they were excited that for the first time running wasn't going to kind of dictate my life how it had the last like 10 years. So yeah, there was a bit of a mixed bag, and people online were generally very supportive. I had a few people here and there who kind of, criticized me about how I could walk away with, without thinking about it. But otherwise, people were very, very good about it and, treated me well. So I was happy.
All right. Hey, Tina, any man that's been married for more than 2 months knows not to tell his wife what he thinks she should do. So
it's going to be wrong either way, right?
Exactly.
And it's important too, for those who don't realize, explain, Steve, your husband kind of wears two hats. He's a little more than just your husband in this situation too.
Yeah. So my husband is also my coach. He's been my coach for quite a long time. And so, yeah, our relationship is very tangled up. It works incredibly well. As much as people find that hard to believe, it does. I think he's enjoying it now, though, that I don't wake him up in the middle of the night with a training question and like tapping him, in bed, like, hey, why are we doing this workout on Friday? So I think he's enjoying that part. But yeah, it was definitely, I guess, harder for him to say either way, because he knew as my husband, my heart wasn't in it, but as my coach, he was like, oh, I was so close. So, yeah, it was a tough situation for him to be in.
So that was in February. You stepped away, started doing that. You talked about changing your diet, and you put on weight, all of that. And then kind of what was the next step from there?
Yeah, so I kind of said from that day that I was going to take as long as it needed off. You know, if I needed 6 months of no running, fine. You know, I kind of almost had accepted whatever it would be, I would do it. And kind of almost channeled all that competitiveness where you say, I really want to run a X time, so I'm going to get to bed early, I'm going to eat right, I'm going to, I'm going to get a massage, I'm going to do all these things. It was kind of like, well, if I'm going to get my period back, then I'm going to be the best get period back person there could ever be. So I did like it all in one go.
That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to I wanted to win at that. And so, you know, I quit running suddenly, didn't do any exercise, ate whatever I want, whenever I wanted. Got acupuncture, forced myself to learn how to relax, take time to just chill. You know, I did it all in one go. And it was a difficult time, as you mentioned at the beginning, about finding myself. You know, that was kind of a, you know, rediscovering like, who am I without running? Like at first I thought, you know, here's me with this podcast and this business saying, you know, I don't run anymore. Is anyone going to even want to listen to me anymore? Are they going to think, you know, you're a quitter, you shouldn't be here? So there was a lot of that going on. But I kind of came to realize that it was me that people liked, not so much the fact that I was a fast runner. So yeah, I just had a few months of kind of this weird, like being in a bubble, kind of almost as if I was just in this quiet before the storm. And then, yeah, sure enough, I did not get my period back, but I found out before I managed to have one that I had got pregnant on the first egg my body had released in 9 years. So although I never got to have that period, I got something even better in that I found out I was pregnant. So
that's awesome. Congratulations.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
See, you're so awesome. You just skip over that whole part and go just straight to the pregnancy.
So my sister was like, you know, people are going to hate you, right? And I was like, thanks. She was like, everyone's just going to say, well, look at you. You just skip over the hard part and go straight to the good part. And I was like, well, don't know if it quite skipped over the hard part. I kind of had to do a lot of work in the meantime. But she's like, well, people are not going to understand it. They're going to hate you. I was like, oh, thank you. That's so nice.
Nice sister.
Yeah.
Tell on them to make you feel good like that. Oh. So now how far along are you now?
I am 17, nearly 18 weeks.
Oh, that's exciting. And I saw through social media that you had a pretty cool gender reveal. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I'd always wanted to do something like that. And it was funny, actually, even a few days before my husband and I were talking, and I knew I was going to find out all along. Like, I couldn't handle waiting. I'm too much of a planner. And, you know, I'd been like, oh, we're going to do this for gender reveal, and we're going to find out on this day and that day. And I was like, what would you do if I didn't have an opinion? He was like, I'd probably wait. And I was like, oh, there we go. Once again, I'm making the decisions here. But no, he was happy to find out. And so, yeah, we got the envelope, got the ultrasound tech to put it in an envelope, and they did it really well with a nice little card, and gave it to a bakery the next morning, had a cake made, which had We didn't know at the time, but when we cut into the cake, it had pink frosting in the middle, which meant it's a girl. So we found out it was a little girl, and yeah, it just makes it all the more real knowing you actually have a gender for it now.
That's so exciting. Now, we won't ask you about names, but have you guys started picking out names?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got one that we really both like. And so we probably will go with that one. But yeah, I'm not saying it out loud. I keep saying that's one thing. I'm so public with everything and I love being public, but that's one thing I want to keep between us. So yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. And that's one of the things when we had talked, we let the listeners know that you were coming on, and we always ask if there's questions. And we did get some questions that hopefully we'll get to. But overwhelmingly from people, I just heard just how much they just really appreciated you and your openness and all that. So thank you.
Thank you to everyone that said that. That's sweet.
And it was interesting because you talked about you hadn't run for several months, and then talk about you have started running just a little bit again, and kind of talk about that first run back.
Yeah, so I said all along I wasn't going to run until I got my period, but then I found this out and I thought, you know what, like it's kind of safe now. I'd read up on how, nothing you can do running or anything is going to damage anything. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And I hadn't actually announced at that point. I kind of just said, I knew things were working on all my social media. So people were like, oh, yeah, things are back on track. But they had no idea that was what it actually was until I actually announced. But yeah, I kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, I want to try this, but I don't want it to be a pressure situation. I did not want to know what, I knew that I would know what pace I was running, but I didn't want to care. So I just said to myself, okay, I'm going to go out and run for 30 minutes. I'm going to go as slow as I need to keep my heart rate at. I decided using math method, which I'm not sure if you guys are, familiar with or whatever, but it's keeping basically your heart rate very, very aerobic. So it's 180 minus your age, plus or minus a few numbers based on different circumstances, but very, very easy. And so I kept my heart rate at that. And that first run, I actually ran with my husband, and I was getting so annoyed because in my head, I'd had this vision of the first run back, and it would be just so nice because I'd be free and I was just running for myself and it would be so fun. And I knew I'd be going slow, but I'd be taking it easy and I'd be enjoying it. But every time we went up even a slight incline, my heart rate shot up in the air. And he would kind of get a little bit ahead of me, even though at the time we were running, 10, 11 minute pace. And when I used to run before, a very, very, very easy day, like after a race would be 8:30 to 8:45. So we were running significantly slower than he was comfortable with and that I'd been running before, but he would pull away and I'd get annoyed and say, I can't do this. I can't run with you. I can't do this anymore. And I ended up telling him to go ahead, but he wouldn't go because he was like, no, we're going to do this together. And so that first run actually wasn't what I expected because I was getting so flustered because I just kind of realized how out of shape I had become in such a short amount of time. But then from there, I started to run more on my own and just keep it nice and easy. And it didn't feel good for quite a while, to be honest. It was probably a month or two where I feel like my body kind of understood what it was doing. But that first month, I felt like a cross between like Bambi on ice and like the Tin Man. I just felt so stiff, so uncoordinated. And like whenever Steve would see me running, he said, you just look so uncomfortable. You look like you're just kind of not really sure what you're doing. And so yeah, I think
comments helped too, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's funny in itself. We ended up having a little bit of an argument one day because he was like, I know you can run 8-minute pace. And I was like, I cannot run 8-minute pace. And he was like, but I know you can. And he was like, if you just run a little bit faster, you'll be so much more efficient. And so one day I went out to prove a point that I couldn't run 8-minute pace. And I didn't run 8-minute pace that day. And then I got really upset because I was like, now you've shown me how out of shape I actually am. And I'm making myself sound like a crazy person on this podcast.
I'm really enjoying this because you're making yourself sound like everyone who's listening to this podcast, and it's great to hear. I really appreciate it.
I have many meltdown stories. But yeah, so I was, then I was like, look what you've made me do. Now I know how slow I am, whereas before I didn't know. But then a few days later, I did another run where I didn't have this pressure of, could I hit this pace or not? And I ran well under 8-minute pace. That was just a one-off. I haven't run that since. But it was just funny that, he was making remarks trying to help. But in the end, I got so annoyed with him that I wanted to prove a point. And so I decided to choose a hilly day to try and prove this point. Not purposely, but it just happened to be the day that I was like, right, I'm going to show you I can't run 8-minute pace. And I wasn't anywhere near it. So, yeah. So, yes, lots of kind of stressful moments and not really enjoyable moments in the first month or so. And part of that was because it is really humid here. And so that obviously doesn't make it easy. But after about a month, it started to get better. And that was after I announced I was pregnant, and people were saying, oh, when you get pregnant, you really slow down. And I was like, well, I'm actually getting a little bit faster each day because I'm kind of getting back in shape. And now I've hit the wall and I'm going backwards again. But I did have a few months there where I was kind of feeling more normal.
It's that nice little sweet spot in between being fatigued and all that first rush of hormones, and then before you start getting too big and awkward.
Mm-hmm.
I use the same excuse.
Us guys, we've been kind of sitting back because, when it comes to talking about hormones and periods and pregnancy, we really don't have a lot of knowledge on that. But I guess one of the questions I have that, once your child's born, do you have any kind of plans after that? Are you just going to kind of, retire to just a casual runner? Or, are you looking at maybe some, more competitive stuff in the future?
I just don't know if I could do the casual runner thing. I'm doing it right now, but that's just because I have that, this is the priority right now. No matter what, I'm going to keep this baby safe. I'm not going to, if I run too hard or too fast, I'm going to stress her out. So I've got that to kind of keep my ego in check. Even though I do still often find that it's difficult to, when I go out, when I leave my doorstep and say, I'm going to run 6 miles, and I know about halfway through that 6 miles isn't a good idea, or I'm not feeling good or whatever, but I have to fight myself to say, okay, let's just stop at 4 because you don't feel good. Whereas that old part of me, that competitive part, wants to be like, no, you said you were going to do 6 miles, so get on with the 6 miles. So I just don't know if I didn't have that kind of conscience from having a baby in there, that I would be able to kind of stop myself from getting too competitive. So yeah, I definitely have a plan to make a comeback someday. As I mentioned, I do still have some times that I want to go after. And I've always dreamed and always known I was going to be that mother runner who was 37, 38 years old, who's just running faster than ever. I've always had that gut feeling, even when I was a teenager, that I was always going to be one of those older women on the elite scene. But the biggest thing for me is that I do not want to rush it. I know how precious those first year or years are, and I have absolutely no intention of getting back, rushing it back or trying to make it by a certain day. Not only do these women often end up with stress fractures or back fractures, but it just, to me, I just don't want to miss those moments that I'll only get, once, twice, maybe 3 times in a lifetime. And, I'm quite enjoying right now being able to kind of go with the flow. But I know once I get back into the mindset of competitive running, I kind of won't be able to stop myself. So I want to put it off as long as I can.
So while you're training right now, are you following any kind of schedule? Or are you just kind of just freely however you feel? Are you doing any kind of cross training?
Mm-hmm. For the most part, I've been following, kind of just fallen into a routine. I have been strength training twice a week with my strength coach. He's very careful to make sure that he's not pushing me too much, constantly checking up on me. and seeing how things are going, backing off things if we need to. So I do that twice a week, and I've been running either 3 or 4 times a week. Usually take one day off a week. This week, today was my second day off in a row. Had a bit of a stressful day with my website not playing fair, so I was kind of sort that out all day. But it's kind of nice to be in that situation where for the first time ever, having a lot of stuff going on, I was like, okay, running is not on the cards today, and that's okay. Whereas the rest of my kind of running life has been, well, you better find a way to get that run in, even if that means doing it at 9 p.m. at night. So, yeah, for now, I'm just kind of running what I feel like, going out 3 to 4 times a week, doing 3 to 6 miles, depending on how I feel. It's hard not to look at Strava and see, last week was 18. So, well, I should try and make this week 20, and I should try and make next week 25 and things like that. But so far, I've been able to keep that ego in check.
That's good. You were talking about your website, which first of all, I want to give you a huge thank you for making the time for us, not just for the fact how busy you are, but yeah, there has been a little bit of a meltdown in talking to Tina earlier. The past 2 days, her website and the email that's connected to it has completely shut down. And you were saying, like, as of this morning, they were thinking it might be gone.
They say they have it now. They're changing the story a bit, but it's been 2 days, and so I'm going to go after them pretty hard once they get it back up. Yeah. For now, I don't want to do anything that's gonna possibly annoy them even more to put mine at the bottom of the list. So I'm just kind of for now pestering them, but doing it in a nice way. And then once they get it back up, then I might kind of chase them a bit for some compensation or something, because it's been 2 days, so that's quite a long time.
It is. Well, if you need some help going after them, just let us know. We'll send all our community who will gang up on them after.
Do you know, that's actually what I was thinking. If they don't help me out, I'm going to basically ask all my fans, everyone that knows me, to individually call them up and say how they were inconvenienced by my website being down or something, so that they just get fed up with phone calls. So that was my plan. So I might well be calling on you guys for that if they don't help me out.
I like it. Well, let's talk about your community, because you've started. You've been doing. How long have you been doing podcasting for? Going back to the original one that you did.
Are you tired of muscle cramps, running out of energy, and the dreaded gut bomb during an endurance event? That's why Sword created Sword Endurance Drink Mix. Clean, sustainable sports fuel for hour after hour of strenuous activity. With only 6 natural ingredients, it has everything your body needs and nothing it doesn't. So give Sword a try today. Head over to drinksword.com and use the discount code Heartland Runner at checkout to save 20% off your purchase.
I started January 2015 I was working for Runners Connect, and I was doing Run to the Top. That was a podcast before I came along, but they'd kind of let it go the 6 months before, and it had got to the point where it was, just barely really there. It was just kind of a forgotten about podcast, and I kind of revamped it, brought it to life again, and then made it like my project, to where I wanted to really make it big. And so, yeah, I did that for about 2 years, grew it. I was really proud of how much I grew it and how big the community grew around it. And then this year, around the same time I stopped running, I started my own podcast and website, Running for Real. So that's where I'm at now.
Which is wonderful. It's a really kind of cool concept. So kind of talk a bit about Running for Real and the whole community behind it.
Yeah, so I was working for Runners Connect as their community manager, and I loved my job. I was happy enough doing it, handling all the social media, all the content on the blog, everything like that. But I really missed helping people with kind of not feeling alone and kind of helping them feel better about themselves. Because, you mentioned earlier about when people get injured and how you just feel alone, you kind of feel like you've been kicked out of the club for a few months. Or, if you are, you had a bad race and you feel like you're not good enough and you're wondering what's wrong with you. I wanted to create a place or have something where people could kind of be honest with one another and say, like, look, my Instagram is not is not as makes my life look perfect, but it's not. And I wanted people to be able to be real with one another and kind of share funny stories and share things that happen. Like, a woman today shared with us a picture that her daughter had drawn for her, and it had little symbols related to running, and there was like some buckets of sweat, and there was like, a shoe and a finish line, and then there was a little pile of poop, and like things like that. Like, she just shared that's what her daughter said her mum's running was. And it just things like that. Like, someone would never really share that otherwise, but she was like, this is my running for real moment. So I wanted to create a place where people could be honest and just share who they really are. And it's grown, and people have become friends, and all over the world they meet up, and it's really grown into just this wonderful place where everyone's just really supportive of one another. So really proud of that.
So run to the top. That was a lot of experts in the fields, elite athletes, and people like that. What on your new podcast? What type of guests do you look for that? Because I used to listen to Run to the Top all the time, and I haven't had a chance to listen to your new one. But I'm definitely going to, because honestly, I didn't know you had a new one. But anyway, I'll sorry. But I'll definitely listen to it and put it on heavy rotation. But what's the type of person that you look for to bring onto that podcast?
Well, firstly, I'm hoping that doesn't mean you continued listening to Run to the Top and didn't realize that I wasn't hosting it anymore.
Oh, no. I
just like, there's something a little different here.
I heard the announcement that you were gone.
She's adopted that American accent. You see,
we fixed her accent
and changed my name. But actually, a lot of the experts are kind of similar. Like, I have a lot of the same kind of people, and I try and be really unique. Like, I have next week I have a journalist. And, who would think to interview a running journalist? But I interviewed her on, all these topics that most people are afraid of talking about, like what she's found about doping and what she's found about, coaches abusing their athletes, like particularly high school athletes, or like athletes with high testosterone levels, like things like that, because, she doesn't mind talking about it because she's a journalist. Or, I might have someone who's talking about something that's just completely off the wall, but maybe it helps you. So it's a lot of the same kind of experts or just people in the field, but then there's also a wider balance. So I have people, looking at overall health, like maybe you've struggled with a mental issue and it's not necessarily about running, but you can apply it to running. Or like I have... in a few weeks, I have coming on one of the community members who told us that he was a drug addict, ended up homeless, ended up in jail, and then running turned his life around. So things like that, more real people. But the biggest difference is that I get these guests to be honest. I have them share a moment where something went wrong. I really kind of dig at them to be honest and not kind of give us the cookie cutter this is what I'm supposed to say answer. And I really make them kind of dig in and kind of show that they're human in every way that I can. So I think that's the biggest difference. Runners Connect was a bit more kind of formal. This is a bit more like, come on, tell me who you really are. What's really going on behind that Instagram picture kind of thing.
It almost seems to me like a reflection of yourself, with kind of like the changes that you've done here recently. And, you've always been just a really open person and, painting yourself in a real light. And it's almost like, I want you to paint yourself in a real light to me.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, that's exactly right. And particularly with like elite runners, I do not let them off the hook. If they keep giving me the run around of like, oh yeah, I just love running and it just feels good all the time, then I'm going to be like, well, no, it doesn't feel good all the time. So what do you do when it doesn't feel good? So I'll just keep digging at people if they aren't being honest, to kind of be honest and really share. But so far, people have kind of understood the gist of it, and they've been very good with sharing.
So does being so open about everything, is that something that comes naturally to you? Or was it something that you kind of made a conscious decision to do that?
I think I've always been quite open. Like, even if I think about, when I was in high school, I would always tell people, friends things that like probably shouldn't be saying, just silly things I'd done. Or, like if I had, spilt something down my shirt, rather than cover it up, I'd be like, look what I did, kind of thing. So I've always been like that. But I think my one of my grandmas was German. And so she was always very direct. And I think that kind of had an influence on me. But the rest of my family, my mum, dad, and sister are very private people. And at first they kind of struggled with it because they were like, why are you sharing everything? Like, we stop telling the world. And I, at first I was like, I don't know, it just feels right. And but now they kind of get it a bit more. But yeah, so I don't know if it kind of where it came from, but just as long as I can remember, I've always been very honest with people. But I guess I just kind of broadened the the bubble, I guess, that I was prepared to share with to eventually be like worldwide. So I just figured if I can help people, if I can be honest with people, if it helps someone else because they're feeling that way, then it's worth it to me. And so that's kind of where I got to.
Do you ever get pushback from other elites saying that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing?
Not while I was running, but I think when I did stop running and say that, I was stopping running to get my period back, I think I got the vibe that a lot of people were kind of a bit annoyed at me, like, you're making running out like it's a bad thing and that the life we live is, kind of not healthy. So I definitely got that sense from people, and just they'd share other articles about the topic that came out that weren't about me, but they mentioned me, and they made it very clear that they didn't agree with what I was saying. So I definitely had that, but no one has directly kind of said to me, stop being honest. And a lot of elites kind of enjoyed it when I would, if we would be at, let's say, a big race. I remember one, for example, the European Championships, and I kind of, sat around a table with a group of girls, and one of them was saying about how well something went, and I said, oh, I don't know how that went well for you. Like, the week after that race, I was like dead for 2 weeks. I couldn't barely lift my legs. And then she kind of backpedaled and said, oh, well, actually, it was really tough. And I specifically remember her Instagram showing this like picture of like, crushed this workout today, only a few days after my race and things like that. So I think people kind of like it because they're like, oh, actually, I can kind of maybe be honest a little bit with her. So I find they kind of follow my lead in some ways.
That's great. I like that.
I don't think that's different than much anyone else out there because, we, even us mere mortals that, we feel like that we have to just be back at it a couple of days later after a hard run or a hard race. And, taking time off is taboo, whatever. It's just probably the most important thing that you could be doing after a hard effort like that. And so, love the honesty.
Mm-hmm. And that was one reason I wanted to do it more, was to show, everyday runners that, hey, if I am not feeling good and I'm struggling, then, it's okay if you admit you're struggling, because I'm supposed to be the one that's putting out this image that everything is easy and gliding along like this is all fun all the time. So if I'm saying it's not, then it's okay for you too. So hopefully that came across.
well, Tina, we'll have to put you in our messenger circle because the three of us all the time are, that sucked today.
You're more than welcome to.
And I know body image has been something that you've always been very open about. And it seems to be something that a lot of runners, especially women, I think men are kind of, I'm interested because we have two guys here. What are kind of your thoughts on body image for men? It was really interesting. We had Nathan DeWall on a few episodes ago, and he was really interesting because he went from being obese to running Badwater. But he, at the time that he was obese, he had no idea that he was.
Yeah.
And it really took, almost a medical expert to point out that, no, you're obese, and he was oblivious to the fact. But he wasn't running at the time. So I'm just kind of curious because both Stephen and Andy have lost a lot of weight and have gone through that. How do you guys feel about male body image and running?
I think that it's probably a little bit more prevalent than what men are going to let on. Because, we're not going to talk about things like that. And, me honestly, I've got some body issues. I think that, I don't have that perfect male chiseled physique that I would like to have, that no one expects for me to have, that I have no reason to ask that of myself. And yet I want it anyway. And I know that's probably never going to happen.
I find you sexy, Andy.
Oh, well, I'm, the two of us, I mean, we're just quite the catches. But but anyway, I think it's there a lot more prevalent in for men than what you realize. It's just a matter of just trying to get over that, and just be accepting of yourself. This is this is who I am, and this is how I'm going to look, and I can tweak it a little bit here and there. But that's a hard thing. It really is.
I know for me, I think I had an experience kind of like Nathan. I mean, I always kind of figured, okay, I got a little extra poundage, but nothing major. And then a coworker, we were just chatting one time, wasn't being mean. He's like, well, you're a pretty big boy. And then after I had some blood pressure issues and I lost some weight, and I go back and look at photographs from that, I'm like, wow, I was huge. So yeah, there's still things. I mean, I like to joke that from the waist down, I'm a sexy beast, but just don't look the waist up. But I'm working on it. I'll get there. I'll get the whole thing. Andy, you didn't return the compliment either. I'm hurt now.
Oh, I think you are a sexy beast.
I appreciate it, brother.
See, I wonder too, though, like Stephen, your story is similar to Nathan, that I almost wonder somewhat, like, running's really wonderful, and that's how, we've lost weight and we've done all that stuff. But I feel almost like sometimes the running itself puts a little bit of that pressure in the body image on yourself.
You need to I don't understand what you're saying.
So, like, before, you didn't realize that you were heavy, and then you lost the weight. And then it's kind of, once you've lost the weight, now you're running and stuff, then kind of some of the jokes come out, and it's like, well, I'm working on this, and now I'm working on this. And it almost like being around other runners and kind of being in that brings some of that pressure up.
That's why I got into ultra running, so I can just eat whatever I want, and it's extra fuel.
Kind of proves your point, though, in a way, with what you were asking there, I think, which, yeah, that the more you get into running, the more you kind of do pay attention to that stuff. And like you said, you don't want to put that weight back on, or don't want to be that weight. But I think that's quite a lot of what is happening here, with especially as running is a way that a lot of people have lost weight, and then it becomes a thing. Well, I don't want to go back to there. I better not go back to there, because I don't want to go look like that again. So yeah, Crystal, I think that exactly proves your point.
Do you guys have, I have 3 weights. I have race weight, happy weight, and I need to lose some weight. That's kind of where I judge myself. Most of the time I want to be in happy weight, where I can have a shake or a donut if I want. And then at race weight, I'm like, okay, I can't wait for this to be over so I can eat some naughty things I don't get to eat when I'm really training. So do any of you do that, or is it just me being weird again?
Oh, no, absolutely. My body does not like to be at race weight, and I'm a month away from that. And so I'm almost there. And yeah, my body just doesn't like to be in that place, but that's where it performs the best. And so, that's what I got to do for now. And so then after Chicago, then, I'll have some pizza and donuts and get back to happy weight.
And deep dish pizza, that better be in Chicago.
Oh, I've already got it planned.
Good.
How has being pregnant changed kind of some of your body image and how you feel?
Yeah, well, I guess firstly to kind of weigh in on the body image thing, that's something I've kind of really reflected on it a lot over the last 6 months, because when I was a teenager, I ate what I wanted. I did what I wanted. I was running well, not as well as I was the last few years, but I was running well for my age. And, I didn't even think about food. It was just, I ate when I was hungry. I stopped when I was full. Yeah, I would sometimes eat, fried chicken and fries on the way home from a night out or something like that. But, overall, I just kind of did what I wanted. And then the more running came into the picture and the more serious I got, the more it kind of started to control things, and not in a way like, friends are going out for dinner, I'm going to make an excuse that I can't go. I always prided myself on being that person. If I was going out to dinner and I looked at the menu and a burger and fries sounded good, I was going to get a burger and fries. But it just kind of, my parents commented on it more than anything, that when I went home, it was like, okay, I need to eat this, I need to eat that, I need to have this, so we need to buy this, that, this, and this, and this is what we're going to do. I was very just in control. And I needed to get the right fuel to race well at the times I was home. But now, and then I went through that phase where I stopped running, and then I kind of went off the rails. I had everything and anything I wanted. I had peanut butter pancakes and peanut butter chocolate chip pancakes with syrup and whipped cream and all that. And then I would have, go out and get whatever I wanted. If I wanted, to eat an entire pizza, I would eat an entire pizza. And then after that, my body, once it stopped kind of saying, okay, my hunger kind of went away essentially once I kind of leveled out, but I ended up leveling out at the weight I was as a teenager. And then once that hunger went down, I was back in the mindset of, I'm going to eat when I'm hungry, I'm stop when I'm full. And that's kind of where I am now. So it was kind of interesting that, I had all these years of controlling it, and I was thinking about it a lot because I was trying to control it. And now I've got back to the stage where I'm like, you know what, it doesn't matter what I look like. I'm, going to be the healthiest I can for me. That's going to involve some junk food, but that's going to involve some healthy food. And, I think having a little girl more than having a baby makes it more real for me, because I know how critical I was of myself for many years. And even when I was at my leanest, when I look at pictures of myself now and I think, my God, I was so skinny. And I thought I was one of the bigger elites. But I look at those photos and I think even during those times, I remember going to the mirror after a run, lifting up my shirt, looking at my stomach and thinking, I'm never going to get that six pack. Where is it? And so I never want my daughter to feel like she has to look a certain way or be a certain way to be good enough or to be, fast enough or to be loved or whatever. So I think that makes it more real for me. So, that's one thing. But then the other thing is it's actually quite refreshing being pregnant and looking down, particularly at my belly, which was always my self-conscious area, and seeing it grow. But rather than thinking, oh no, what are you doing? Your belly's getting bigger. Now I kind of look at it and see a little round thing, and I'm thinking, there's a little person in there, and it's amazing to look at. So it's been really, really good for my, guess body image issues, because I've kind of learned to deal with them over the past few months, and now I get to appreciate as I'm getting bigger rather than kind of seeing it as, oh no, that's more weight I've got to lose afterwards.
Right. Yeah, I love how you said that. That was just awesome.
Thank you.
Do you think you have a few more minutes to answer some listener questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, and then Crystal's got those. I do not have them.
One thing I should just tell you guys. So I kicked my husband out of the house, being honest here, kicked my husband out of the house, and he's sitting out on the porch. So he's fine out.
Well, tell him to come on in.
But anyway, yeah, ask the questions, ask away. He's fine. I can hear him. He must be on the phone or he's talking to himself, one or the other. I can just about hear him.
And it's funny because I think a lot of the questions
are about him.
Sorry, no, let's just sit here and talk about Steve while he's sitting out in the pouring rain. I think it's hailing out there. Yeah, I think we actually covered a lot of the questions because people were wondering about, comeback. One of actually our friend Bill, who's over from the Negative Splits podcast, he started writing out a whole list. I think he wanted to come and do the interview. You've touched on a lot of things already that he was kind of wondering about. But some of the stuff he wanted to know during the height of your half marathon and marathon training cycles, if you could talk a little bit about some of your peak mileage and what you kind of learned worked best for you during those kind of training cycles. Sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the number everyone's probably listening out for is my highest number was, you'll like this as well. This is a story, 99.6 miles, because
I know this story.
added it up and I said, oh, I'm at 99.6. Can I go out and run half a mile? And a certain someone was like, no. And I was like, why? It's just half a mile. And he was like, what does it matter? And I was like, because I'll get over 100. And, I just want to do it once. And he was like, I just don't understand the point. What's the point of just putting on running shoes for half a mile? And so then I thought about, sneaking out and going to do it. But then I thought, if I go out, I'm I'm going to like roll my ankle on a curb, or I'm going to do something, and there's going to be a fluke accident, and then he's going to be right, and I'm going to be injured. So I ended up stopping there. So that was the highest. But I would average most weeks in the high point around 85 to 90. But I think a lot of it comes down to just building up over time. It was easy for me to look at other elite runners and say, they're running 120, 130 miles a week. And I'd get frustrated and say, why can't I be there? I want to be there. Like, what am I missing? Because I'm only at 80 to 90. But then we just did it slowly, but surely, consistently. Each year we'd add 5 miles to the highest point. And that just worked out well. And it meant that my body could adjust each year. And Steve was very good about being conservative. But then it was more about when I got to race day, I always felt fresh. I always performed. A few times, obviously, I didn't. You're always going to have some bad days. But for the most part, I was always ready when it mattered. Like when I was in college, the other coaches, our rivals, who always won at nationals, would call me money in the bank because they knew I would perform. And so it was just more a case of, okay, well, if this is working and I know adding more mileage is going to risk injury, is it really worth it? Probably not. So I trusted Steve. I listened to Steve, and it worked. And then I think when it comes to finding, what's best for you, it is kind of a case of trial and error, but you have to build up slowly. So if you have a goal, I want to get to where I can run 70 miles a week. Don't go, if your previous cycle was 40, but you got injured, you tried 50 once and you got injured. Well, that's probably too big. So maybe do 45 for a year, and you just have to do it slowly. Unfortunately, some people can get away with it, but in my opinion, it's not really worth it if you're risking injury. So we always like to be safe.
Tina, I have to say you are much stronger than me, because at 99.6, I would have been sneaking out of the house at 2 a.m, even if I had to crawl that 0.4 miles. And it would still bug
wouldn't
me.
you have had that same fear of what if you rolled your ankle, or what if you tripped on a curb and smashed your nose on the floor? It's karma's way of saying, why do you need to do that?
I don't know, just because I would need that round number.
I know. And it bothers me to this day. You can tell by the way I said it.
That's why he's out on the porch in the rain.
Yeah, I know. He's been shut out. Get out.
Well, I think we have just one last question from Bill, because he would kill me if I didn't ask this one. So what was her go-to rust-busting workout after an injury where you were worried about a loss of fitness? So when you have been injured, what was that one thing to slowly bring yourself back? And I think he's asking for personal reasons.
Well, I think that's a common one, because a lot of people, obviously, all of us at some point go through injuries. But I'm going to give this question in 2 parts. The first, I will answer the question, but the first part is, I think the biggest thing when coming back from injury is you cannot look at paces. You cannot compare. You just have to run. We found I would always just run, whether it was coming back from a race, after my time off after a race, or an injury. You have to just let your body tell you when it's ready. And the easiest way to do that is not to look at paces. So we would do everything either by minutes, or I would literally stick my arm out at Steve after a repeat. So I couldn't see the number that it said. He would reset the watch and then hand it back to me. Or if he wasn't there, I would memorize the number of clicks it was to get it back to reset, so I couldn't see. So I think the biggest thing is if you don't look at your watch, and I have this hashtag in my community called No Watch Me, which I encourage people to not look at their paces. And it's amazing how much better people feel, how much faster they run without those expectations. But in answer to the actual question, I think for me it was always hills, doing a 25 to 30 minute hill, just, finding a hill that's, from 400 meters to a few miles long, and kind of doing stretches of, running for 30 seconds, running back, jogging down for 15, running for 5 minutes, jogging down for a minute, kind of lots of little intervals where you can't measure it, because I just found that would build the endurance, build that strength, but you can't really compare on hills because you're just kind of running random distances, but it got you a good workout in not, a huge amount of time. If you're coming back from an injury, you don't want to overdo it and do 8 miles worth of work your first time back.
Great. And you know what, before we go, I do want to talk about one other project that you have going, because I think it's really interesting. And you've talked about your strength coach a couple times tonight. And I know that on September 1st, you launched another round of your strength training for runners program. And I know this is something that I think all of us here are very guilty and kind of lacking in. So if you can talk a little bit about it, and do you have plans to launch another series and kind of how it works, all of that?
Yeah, so this is our second round, and actually we're closing the doors tonight for this one, but we will be offering it. We offer it every few months, 2 or 3 months. And it basically came down to, I was getting injured quite often. I was doing my quote unquote strength training, which was, some squats with dumbbells in my hand, some lunges, some push-ups, things like that, planks. I was doing those, but I kept getting little injuries all the time, or, here's a week off here and 3 days off there. And I was just getting frustrated. So we went to get my gait analysis checked, and the guy there said, well, you can throw out 90% of your strength training. And I was like, what? So thankfully, I just moved somewhere where I'd spoken to the strength coach recently, and I could feel him watching me whenever I was doing my strength training. Like he was I could tell he was like kind of cringing at it, but didn't say anything. So I spoke to him, and, we got on really well, and I started working with him, and he completely changed everything about what I'd been doing. I was doing, heavy weights. I was doing, these new exercises. He was completely chopping down everything I was doing. I went from saying I could hold a plank for 6 minutes, to doing it correctly his way. I could only do it for 30 seconds. And so we revamped everything, and suddenly I didn't get any injuries. And that went for 2 years. I didn't get really a single injury other than a little bit of peroneal tendonitis, which never stopped me running. And dry needling was what eventually got rid of that. But then I thought, he's so good at what he does, so knowledgeable. There has to be a way I can give this to other people, because I knew other people were going through those same frustrations. And I knew that it wasn't going to take doing, these huge, long workouts in gyms and using weight machines, because what we did was very simple. So we started out creating these programs individualized for people. You send a video, you send 5 videos of yourself doing these exercises, Drew sets, and then he assesses your form doing those exercises and prescribes a workout or 2 workouts a week for each person, about an hour long. And it's just been incredible to see how I call them strong stars, the strong stars have seen improvements. I've had people who have been running with, had knee issues for the last 5 years. They no longer need their knee brace or whatever when they run. We've had people who have giant PRs having changed nothing except for their strength training. And, everyone's saying how good they feel, how strong they feel, how they're not getting injured as much. And so, yeah, it's been doing really well, and we're really proud of it, because it's the only thing out there I can see where it's individualized around you and your injuries. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wow, that's fantastic. I didn't realize it was that individualized. That's very well. I haven't really heard of anything else kind of like that. That's very cool.
Yeah, and we even, he even creates a video where he talks to the individual and says, hey, Peg, now I noticed that when you do this exercise, your knee tends to cave in. So if it caves in now doing this, then it means you're probably doing that. Or, so he gives everyone a specific video saying, watch out for this, pay attention to that. And then they can continue on with more individualized training if they want to. But it's just been really successful. So
wonderful. Well, I see we're getting long on time, and we should probably let Steve come in from the cold. Before we go, though, do you want to let everybody know where people can find you all over social and on the web?
Yeah, so, I guess the Running for Real podcast is what we've already talked about. And if you are listening right now, you're a podcast user. So that's probably the easiest one. You can find that in all the usual iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play places. I also have, you can find me on social, Tina Muir, TinaMuir, Tina Muir 88 on Instagram. but everything else is just my name. And then the Running for Real community, I would love if you could join. It really is wonderful, inclusive for everyone. It is a private group. You have to, request to join, but we accept everyone, unless they keep posting their products on our pages, in which case I will kick you out. But we haven't had many problems with that. But yeah, so that can be found through Facebook, just typing in Running for Running for Real Superstars. And that's on there, and I'd love everyone to join that. I think that is it. Yeah.
Wonderful. We'll make sure everything's in the show notes, and then hopefully by the time that this airs, your website will be back up and everything will be all up.
So.
You have a wonderful blog out there too that
Thank you.
Really, really enjoy.
Thank you.
What about you guys? Do you have anything else?
I just have one thing, Crystal, since this will come out after this coming weekend. I just wanted to thank you for getting me through the Hawk.
In advance.
Oh, you're saying
I'm telling you in advance, since this will come out after the race. So,
well, you're welcome. There were some rough moments there, but I was glad I could help you through it.
But other than that, I just want to thank Tina for coming on. It was very educational. I apologize for not being so involved. I was having to ride the volume sliders the whole time. Obviously, I have a little glitch someplace. But
is that because I was getting too animated and loud at times?
No, it was Andy. It was all Andy.
It's always me.
It's always Andy.
Talking with my hand.
Just one of those things.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, Crystal, before we go, how can people get a hold of us?
Yeah, absolutely. Be sure to come and you can visit our website. Hopefully it's up and working. We're at heartlandrunning.com, and show notes are there. We also have our Facebook group as well. So you come on and join that before that closes down. We have a voicemail. So be sure to leave us a message. Tell us how wonderful we are or how much we suck. We want to hear it all. The number for that is 417-319-1060. And also coming up, if you're out at the Chicago Marathon, be sure to stop by and flag down Andy, and also be sure to wish him a happy birthday. I don't think we've mentioned that he will be running Chicago on his 40th birthday. So,
so excited.
Yay. And then also we are going to be in Tina's neck of the woods. Stephen and I are going down with Team Sword, and we are doing the Bourbon Chase.
Cool.
And so if you see us, you have to be sure to wish Stephen a happy birthday, because that's right around his birthday too. So we have lots of celebrating to do.
I'll definitely come out and try and watch.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. Yeah. So we also want to give a shout out and thank you to the Ozark Mountain Daredevils for the use of their music for both the intro and outro. And as always, if you like this show, be sure to tell a friend. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Well,